Good evening. This is Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center, and I want to welcome you here to our workshop on Ask the Doctor. I absolutely love the opportunity of answering questions for patients, things that they're interested in, things that they're curious about, and tonight we're going to do exactly that. In fact, many of us, I was just watching it this past week, them showing on YouTube how certain musicians did certain tricks. What happens in order to make things appear a certain way. And the remarkable thing is that if you don't know, that unknown can be, it could be really amazing. It could also be very daunting. And likewise, unfortunately, when we don't know how it is that the body works and how it is certain things are being used to your benefit, that unknown becomes, it could become scary. It could create fear. In fact, it can create confusion, which will oftentimes end up not allowing people to move forward as quickly or as rapidly as they're supposed to. So tonight in this workshop, listen, this is your workshop. We're going to be answering questions for you. In fact, some of you online right now, I want you to stop and actually type in a question that you would like to have answered by us tonight. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. We've had patients here in the office ask us certain questions. They've given us certain things that they would like us to answer for them. So we're going to jump into that. We're going to jump into one topic after another. And listen, I've picked these out. What we're going to do is, as we answer the questions, Shannon will make sure that she tags you in the question to make sure that your question has been answered if you're not here tonight, to make sure that you have the opportunity of seeing and hearing what that response was. But I'm going to encourage you, type those questions in. If we're not able to get to them during the workshop tonight, we're going to go ahead and we're going to periodically dig into answering those questions one after the other to make sure that you get the answers to the questions that you desire. So this very first question is come from one of our long-standing patients here at the Limerick Chiropractic Center. His name is Bill, and he asked the questions, why do you perform different techniques on every adjustment? Now, Bill's been around the block with me. He's also had a lot of different types of subluxations created because he's had a number of different types of injuries. And that's really important to understand, is that not every person gets treated exactly the same. In fact, we know that different subluxations, depending upon the origin of why they happened and some of the surrounding damages to the tissues, will require a different technique. Now, one of my friends had written a thesis paper on the over 300 different adjusting techniques. So many different ways of doing the same exact thing. And let me be very clear. The only thing that I care about that technique does is to remove the subluxation, to put the bone back in place and allow that innate intelligence to do what it's supposed to do, communicate properly. We commonly use this safety pin as a means by which we can educate, but for those of you who might be newer to chiropractic, a subluxation is very simply, it's when your brain isn't able to communicate properly with your body. So as the brain creates the signal, it sends it down through the spinal cord, out all the spinal nerves, goes to the individual parts of the body down here at the bottom. Your body then sends a signal back to let your brain know how it processed it and what it needs to do next. Well, when you have a subluxation, what ends up happening is, wow, we've lost that contact. We've lost that connection. Whatever is supposed to be controlled by this can't work at 100% anymore. So my job, regardless of whether it's a Thompson technique, regardless of whether it's a CBP, chiropractic biophysics technique, or if I toggle your atlas or use an activator on you, as long as it puts that bone back in place so that this is able to continue to flow through exactly the way it was created and designed to, it's done its job. Now, we have patients who have congenital defects, things that are called spondylitic spondylolisthesis, where part of the bone is not formed properly. We have others that those congenital defects actually, well, they set up changes in the mechanics. Others where the bones are, well, they're fused together already from birth. They never separated out properly. Some of you have had traumas and scars that have been left behind by other accidents, other injuries. And sadly, listen, just because we look okay from the outside doesn't mean that we're okay on the inside. Hence the reason why we take x-rays, we look within, and we determine what is that best way to get you from where you're at to where you need to be, which is functioning better. So in the course of the day, we have patients, they can be adjusted with over 3 or 4 different techniques for a single patient during a single visit. We have others, we're able to use just that one singular technique in order to address all of their subluxations. Any way we look at it, it's exactly the right choice as long as it gets you back to that optimal level and functioning the best way you possibly can as quickly as possible. So thank you, Bill. I appreciate you submitting that question, because that is one that oftentimes, people hear tables banging, people see those little instruments being picked up, sometimes the jackhammer, Listen, there's all different types of techniques. I will tell you personally, I knew I could have my neck adjusted any other way than seated until I got to chiropractic college. Because at home, my father only adjusted us sitting up because it was more comfortable and it was easier for him, so that's how he took care of us. Well, come to realize, there are a bunch of other ways of doing it. We all get to learn with time. So Billy, thank you so much for asking that question. We'll make sure that you get tagged in this so that you're able to listen to that answer later on. So our next question comes from Miss Carol. Now, Carol is a chiropractic patient, but she's a newer chiropractic patient to our office. And she asked the question, can chiropractors address vertigo? Now, I do love how she asked that question, which is address. I'm going to tell you first off, words have meanings. And in my world, let me tell you, I don't fix anything. If we go back to that safety pin there, let me tell you, the only thing I do is find the subluxation, correct it, and then get out of your body's way. See, that power that made you is the same power that runs you. It's also the power that heals you. Now, it just so happens our body can give us 100 different signals when we have one subluxation, which is why oftentimes we talk about it, I'm not concerned about the feeling, I'm more concerned about the function of your body, of those tissues. And Miss Carol asked this question because, as she's had this episode of vertigo, it's the same area that we've been treating for other reasons. Well, the subluxation, because of something that had occurred, shifted differently, affected a different part of that nerve, which sends signal to a different part of her body, causing a different signal. Now, the problem is that, listen, we really don't care what the signal is. If we're not fixing and correcting the root cause, then the signal's never going to go away. And if we just simply chase the signal, well, sadly, it's going to become that frustration that lives with us for the rest of our lives because we're never getting to the root cause of why is this actually happening. I think back to D.D. Palmer. And in 1895, the very first chiropractic adjustment was made for low back pain. It wasn't made for neck pain or headache. And that adjustment was because the individual, Harvey Willard, had injured his neck and had deafness. Here's the thing. After much analysis and much understanding of the body function and how things were connected, D.D. Palmer made that singular adjustment which released that subluxation and allowed Harvey Willard's hearing to be restored. Those same nerves that control hearing also control the balancing mechanism. Now, I will tell you, for those out there, we just recently did a workshop on anterior head carry. Don't let tech ruin your neck. It is one thing that I would recommend going back and watching. In fact, I referred to somebody else's YouTube video, which was Dr. Hauser from Florida. She's got some really great information about how anterior head carry affects the body. And because he looks at it a little bit differently, how it affects things like brain function, brain fog, our ability to concentrate and focus, besides the blood flow of the body through the brain, through those carotid arteries and veins, and how it can be affected when our head starts moving forward like that. So Carol, I would encourage you, go back about 3 weeks, look for Dr. Hauser. He's wearing a bright yellow shirt. He's got bright yellow glasses on. I want you to go ahead, listen to his 7-minute video. And if you like what you're hearing, make sure that you go to his website. You can look at some of his additional information that he has posted there. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we have other practitioners who speak into these conversations, just using a slightly different lens. So, the next question comes from, Oh, forgive me. It comes from Alyssa. I'm looking at the wrong side of my paper here. So Alyssa asked the question, is it true that grip strength is related to how well your heart may be working or may lead to future possible problems? Now listen, Alyssa knows an awful lot. She was just in tonight. It was a wonderful conversation that we had. She is a holistically minded individual with a healthcare background. Now, to answer the question very directly, number one, we did a whole workshop on this. So I'm going to give you the very short version of how this is connected. The answer is yes. There's a direct correlation between your grip strength and how your heart is functioning. Now, many of you out there that don't have that same type of educational background, I'm going to give you the very brief steps. What ends up happening is there's been a lot of research that's been done. This is not a chiropractic thing. In fact, the cardiologists have already done all of this research where they recognize, well, the heart is not the most important organ in the body. The heart only works because another part of the body tells it to. That's your nervous system. So as your brain creates a signal and sends it down through that spinal cord, it sends it out spinal nerves. And in this case, for your heart, the C5, 6, 7, T1, T2 area, the upper part of that mid-back, all those nerves come together. And small branches off of them are going to come together and they're going to form this thing. It's called the brachial plexus. That just means that there's a whole clump of nerves, sort of like a junction box is there. Well, from that junction box, well, nerves go in all different directions. Most of us think about those nerves that go down our arm. So as I muscle test you in the office, from time to time, you're going to feel that weakness as the arm just simply drops down. Now, as we adjust you, we put the bones back in place, that muscle strength is regained. Here's the problem. The same nerves that control your hand, the same nerves that would cause tingling and numbness in the fingertips, or weakness in this grip of yours, are the same nerve, branches of those, that control your heart. and cause the rhythm of your heart to go beat, to beat, to beat. Now, pardon me. When we have subluxations on our neck and it causes that grip strength to drop off, it is that direct indicator of the health of this heart of yours. All you have to do is Google that research. I will tell you that there are links to that research in the workshop that was done on heart health. In fact, it was done February 9th of this year. I would encourage you, don't take my word for it. Go and research it yourself. Look at it. There are no chiropractic initials on that thing. This is a cardiologist's point of view, and it is an absolutely accurate one based upon the anatomy of how the body functions. So I thought that was a really insightful question. Thank you, Alyssa. So the next question comes from Stephen. Now, Stephen asked the question, can wearing braces, back, knee, etc., be counterproductive? Now, a lot of you out there might be asking, well, how in the world could wearing a brace be counterproductive? Well, actually, it's a very legitimate question. So, as we recognize, braces have a purpose, and at the right time, they serve an awesome benefit to the body. At the wrong time, they actually cause the body to break down even more, which is not okay. So let's think about these braces. These braces are there in order to provide support. They provide support or assistance, which means that, at times they're able to, guide you in different motions. If we're talking about the knee is going to be supported and it's going to be able to track better because it's being guided. Sometimes they use metal stays. Now, in the spine, well, those supports oftentimes, they're not used to guide, they're used to restrict. Keep you from doing stupid. I think that's the most appropriate way of stating it. It limits us from going in a direction or to an extent in that direction that we shouldn't. Now, the other thing that it does in helping to provide is to support weight from being put into these areas that might be damaged. So in the low back, when you wear a support, well, what you do is that support actually takes and it allows for the effect of gravity, that force that is pushing down on us, to jump from above it and then just simply take it down to below that area and transfer the force along its way. Listen, force is going to happen one way or the other. Gravity is going to happen one way or the other. The problem is, though, is that, well, your body was not designed to wear a brace all the time. And in fact, the research that's out there was done by the physical therapist and the orthopedist in regards to scoliosis. Now, if you're not familiar with what scoliosis is, very simply, scoliosis is when the spine doesn't grow nice and straight. When we have subluxations, and those subluxations cause the spine to bend to the side, and your brain says, hey, listen, you know what? I don't want you standing like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, so let me bend you back. And, well, it then tries to compensate again, and it bends you the other way. And so it ends up from behind you. You look like you have this S, okay? This curve from side to side. Well, a lot of times, as young children start having back pain, they have their posture being changed, and one of the very common things is, well, listen, we have to stop this from getting worse. So we're going to put them in a brace. And sometimes they start with very soft braces that help to control this, and when that doesn't work, what ends up happening is they then take and they make a mold in order to actually form around this torso in order to hold them in place. Now, the really cool thing is that just like with braces, you could cause this scoliosis, this bend, to actually lessen. All right? That's great. There's a problem. The problem is that when they take the brace off, not only do they know the body is going to return back to that bent or twisted state, but on top of it, it's going to actually get much worse. See, the outcome studies are already there. Research doesn't have to be duplicated. We already know what it's going to prove. The sad thing is that unfortunately, we know that in the end, wearing a brace doesn't build the muscle strength. So your body is greater than the sum of its parts. Just because you can straighten something out, if you're not supporting it properly, if you're not raising up the strength around it, guess what? Eventually it's just going to wither and just drop right back to where it was. So the good news is that using a brace at the right time is going to remove stress. Awesome. Using a brace longer than it's supposed to be used is going to weaken the body. And that is going to lead to other problems. So the right action at the right time. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you asking that question. Now, our next question comes from a newer patient here in the office. Her name is Kristen. And Kristen asks the question, she has a number of children at home. How soon can babies get adjusted? I love this question. You know, not only did we just do a workshop on kids in chiropractic, so we got to talk about all the remarkable and interesting ways that they created subluxations. I mean, just crazy stuff. We're going to talk about some of the very first ways that babies are able to create these subluxations. Well, I shouldn't say they create the subluxations. We do. See, the first thing is that this child, it's got to come down the birthing canal. Now, I can't say too much about this process because I've never experienced it myself. But apparently, you know, most of you moms out there would, you know, say amen and yes. You know, it's not a really pleasant experience for you. Well, the baby doesn't feel much different because as the baby's coming down the birthing canal, its head is constantly being pushed, and with those contractions to force it down in order to actually deliver the head so that it's able to be grabbed a hold of and then the shoulders can be delivered, those contractions, those forces, unfortunately create stress in that neck. Now, that's saying that we have a normal vaginal delivery, that we're using gravity and the effect of nature to actually help deliver the child. See, sadly, from there, some of the very first subluxations come when man gets involved in the birthing process. So you have somebody my size, maybe much bigger, on the outside, that grabs a hold of the baby's head, turns it all the way to the right and all the way to the left, tilts it, and then tugs on it in order to deliver the shoulders. I don't know, you know. I've held a number of my nieces and nephews right after birth, a lot of patients, children, immediately following delivery. And they're like bobbleheads. There's no control whatsoever. They're just bobbling their head back and forth. They can hardly hold their own head up, let alone hold these bones in place. Here's the problem. If you go back to our video on kids in chiropractic, a normal vaginal delivery is estimated to put somewhere between 25 and 30 pounds of pressure through the baby's head and neck. Forceps, suction, that number goes up to 100 to 150 pounds of pressure. Oh, by the way, it's even worse when we start talking about C-sections because, yes, although the baby's head is nice and round, you know, that's the good thing. The bad thing is that, you know, what should have been assisting us, gravity, we're now having to work against. And let me tell you, the opening is no bigger than if it was a vaginal delivery. So the doctor is reaching in and grabbing a hold and then obviously tractioning straight up in order to deliver the baby. Sadly, the very first subluxations happen with the birthing process. It is not uncommon for those subluxations to affect things like breathing, to cause ear infections, lowered immune systems. The sad thing is that there are numerous issues that are brought about by that, and sadly, and oftentimes what ends up happening is they're symptomatically treated, and like anything, because the body's very resilient, yeah, if you don't deal with the signal, your body will take it away. only to bring it back again and again in different fashions. We're not even going to talk about, kids learning how to ride a bike, kids learning how to walk, the 4,000 impacts they experience by the time that they're 4 years old. Listen, there's numerous reasons. But in the end, I know one thing. The sooner the body is being maintained and kept in that straight and narrow position, the better the body will function. Let's remember that remarkable creation that you get to hold in your hand. In 9 months, 2 cells came together. Those 2 cells formed that body that we get to see. And the amazing thing is that innate intelligence took that child through that process of maturing to be what we get to eventually hold. Listen, as a doctor, I realize that in the end, our job is really simple. Just unleash the power that made that body. Just tap into what's there. Because let me tell you, the intelligent mind of man is not capable of duplicating the inborn intelligence that each and every one of us has. And yes, it starts from before birth. I love the fact that we can answer so many of these questions. In fact, Juan asked a question which, I'm going to close with here, which happens to be, how can chiropractic help me in everyday life? Listen, I only know one thing, and I love the conversation we get to have about the triangle that we use in order to express, what are called vital needs. The hierarchy of things that we should be doing in our life. Well, let me tell you, in each and every one of those levels happens to be some of these things of everyday life. The very first thing, how does chiropractic help you? Well, listen, if we have subluxations, our body isn't going to be capable of digesting food the way it's supposed to. Can't process it, can't break it down properly, not able to assimilate or absorb the nutrients that are there, can't transmit it into the cells, certainly can't have the muscles function the way they're supposed to. It allows for those tissues to do all that and improve the way their body is working. If we look at that next level, we realize that, hey, listen, what's more important than the food that we eat is the water that we drink. Because we can only last a couple days without drinking water. We can go a month or so without food. Well, let me tell you, our body needs to get that water into the tissues. Every single cell in our body needs it. It has to be pumped around the system. That requires our heart. In the end, if we're not able to communicate, we can't do it. Likewise with exercise. One thing I know is it's really tough to exercise if you can't move. I realize that when we have these subluxations, when these bones are out of place, that motion, that mobility, our flexibility is never going to be there. And that to me is one of those worst things that happens when subluxations occur, is we lose the motion. Oh yeah, by the way, just so that everybody out there recognizes and remembers this, listen, the only reason why your disc ever gets fed is because the bones move and they pump nutrients into those tissues. Without that proper motion, disc is never going to get fed. If we have that disc that becomes injured, we're going to be able to sleep really well? Not normally. We have patients who lose sleep because of, disc herniations, disc bulges, disc protrusions. How does it help us in everyday life? I recognize that my chiropractic care keeps this body of mine functioning. So everything from my self-care, my activities of daily living, to my occupation, being able to do what I do every single day, the only reason why I'm able to do what I do is because I maintain this body of mine. The more we maintain this system, the better it works for a longer time. I want each and every one of you to recognize that. That in the end, yes, fixing and correcting our problems is critically important. We need to do it. What's even more important is not just fixing and correcting it, but maintaining it throughout our lifetime. Listen, the best problem to have is the one that we never allow to grow into our system. And I'm going to encourage you, as you've heard these different answers, these different questions that our patients have posed, I want you to do something now. I want you to leave me questions in the comments section. In the future, we're going to come back, we're going to answer these questions. For some of you, we're going to answer them in the office. Since I know that there's been a couple questions that I haven't been able to get to, over the next couple weeks, yes, we are going to continue answering some of these questions. Oh, by the way, I want you to make sure that you're tuning in tomorrow. We're going to answer the question of how to get rid of stinky feet. Yes, one of our patients asked that question. In fact, I had 2 or 3 other patients who heard the question, yeah, they wanted this answer also. So tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to do. Want you to tune in. We're going to answer that one singular question and make sure that we get that information out there so that you can learn how to get rid of those stinky feet naturally and easily so you never have to hear about or smell those things again. I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limber Chiropractic Center, and as always, I want you to make sure that you like this video, leave your comment, and share it with your friends to make sure that others are able to get this information too. Have a great week.